Hi, everybody. Today I have a special treat for you. I have an interview with a physician expert in neuro-linguistic programming and hypnosis. This is exciting stuff because it helps people manage their trauma. And when you can manage your trauma, you can manage your cortisol levels. And when you can manage your cortisol levels, then your thyroid a lot of times will recover on its own, which is really, really exciting. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Clairborne. She is an Atlanta Integrative Physician, thought leader, coach, and master trainer in neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis. She founded a company called the Mind Remapping Company, and she helps leaders and professionals achieve transformative results in their lives by overcoming internal barriers and mastering trauma informed communication. Dr. Clairborne's work emphasizes the power of language in shaping reality and fostering psychological safety within organizations and for individuals. She is a graduate of Emory University and Morehouse School of Medicine. She has spoken at TEDx Asheville and serves as a faculty facilitator for the Equity Matters Project, a project of the ACGME. She is also the author of The Wellness Blueprint and co author of Conscious Anti Racism. Welcome to the show, Dr. Clairborne. You're listening to the Beyond the Thyroid podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Dana Gibbs. I'm an ENT surgeon and hormone specialist. For years, I struggled with my own unrecognized thyroid problems before and even after I was regularly performing thyroid surgeries. Then, one day, I learned something that turned my health around and opened my eyes to the limits of mainstream medicine in treating more subtle thyroid abnormalities. I spent the next 20 years fine-tuning my hormone expertise in disorders like Hashimoto's disease, perimenopause, and stress-related illness. Come join me as I share this new approach to hormones that empowers you to take control of your own thyroid and hormone imbalances. Let's dive in. Hi, friends. Welcome back to Beyond the Thyroid podcast. Today, I have a special treat for you. We're going to talk to Maiysha Clairborne. She is a family medicine doctor turned expert in mind body medicine, specifically neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis to help her clients and her patients improve their health and wellness. And that is something that I am all about, very much so. So let's go ahead and get started and welcome Dr. Clairborne. It's nice to have you
Thank
here.
you so much, Dr. Gibbs. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a long time coming, as we talked about behind in the green room, so to speak.
Yes, in the green room. Super good to have you here. All right. Well, so I've introduced you already so that people know a little bit about your formal stuff, but introduce yourself just a little bit more. I know you started out in family medicine, but
Mhm.
go all the way back because you told me before that you knew you wanted to do more than just mainstream family medicine while you were in medical school. So, what got you interested in being a doctor in the first place?
Well, it's interesting. I think that I always used to say that my mom and my dad had nothing to do with it, but I am a little bit of a legacy. My mom's a retired dentist. My dad's a retired OBGYN. So I have to give credit now, that I'm
Okay.
I'm I'm older and wiser. It's in the blood. But no, I,
Yes.
I I think that the day that I consciously decided it was kind of random. I did an assignment where we had to write a letter to colleges and schools in eighth grade, and
Mm,
I wrote to Emory School of Medicine, and I think I chose Emory because, well, you're in eighth grade. The name sounded cool. It was in Atlanta. It was a cool city. But I remember getting a letter back from Emory saying, "We'd love to show you our school." And I
my
and I
goodness.
remember thinking to myself, "Wow." well, I guess I could be a doctor then. And that was sort of when the decision was made. And I had no context for, what kind of doctor, like where I would end up. And I'd venture to say that where I ended up was very far from where I ever could have imagined. And I'm very grateful for that, how I've integrated things in. So fast forward, I did go to Emory undergraduate school.
Oh, awesome.
Yes, I did. I said because, in 8th grade, you don't really have a context for there's college and then there's medical school. I didn't
Right, you don't
really
know.
get that until later
You
on.
don't
But I
even
did
know.
go to Emory undergraduate and graduating from college as I had applied to medical school. I went to Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta as well. I was given this book called Between Heaven and Earth, and it was about traditional Chinese medicine and how the elements have impact of our lives, how our beliefs and our mind have impact on our lives and our emotions have impact on our body. And I thought that was so interesting. Like it was this medicine was more than just pills and shots. This is college,
Right,
remember,
sure,
right?
absolutely,
Like,
yeah.
oh, there's a spiritual component, there's a mind body component. So that was the first time that I really got interested in something in expanding myself in medicine more than just the traditional Western way.
Sure,
And I
absolutely.
started exploring. And so throughout medical school, I was also studying energies, I was studying traditional Chinese medicine, I was studying aromatherapy, and I was learning all of these things alongside of what we learn traditionally, our physiology and our histology and all of those, or anatomy. And then when I got into residency, fortunately, my advisor and the people around me were very open. So I was able
Mhm.
to talk about it. I was able to even do a little bit of implementation of lifestyle kinds of approaches
Yeah.
while I was in. Now, just for context, I graduated from residency in 2004. I'm 49. This was before integrative medicine was a thing. This was
Yeah.
back when it was still being called alternative medicine.
Right, 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 yeah.
So
One of
people
my
were,
one of my huge mentors has been in the fields for 30 plus years, and he's
yeah,
like, "Yeah, alternative wasn't a thing."
yeah. It was back before Dr. Andrew Weil had his program when
Mhm.
I started, you know?
Yeah,
And so I think that was sort of my entry, into I always credit it to this book, Between Heaven and Earth, because I think that was the first time my eyes were open to medicine was a more than just what I had been taught and what I had seen through my parents and
sure.
through my experiences with my own pediatrician.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm,
It's interesting that it doesn't occur to most medical students, even most residents,
mhm,
that the mind and the body are overlapping, interrelated. We have this idea that physical stuff is over here
mhm,
and mental stuff is over there. And it
mhm,
is not. It
mhm.
is interlocking,
Yeah,
overlapping,
yeah,
and absolutely one affects the other and vice versa. So
yeah.
that's really fascinating. So, did you practice general family medicine for a while before you started into doing more of the mind, body, and integrative practice?
Well, the short answer is no.
Okay.
The short answer is I did it simultaneously
Okay.
because I knew from the time I was in medical school that I was gonna go a particular route. It became very clear to me in residency and coming close to the end of residency, there was not going to be a job that fit what I wanted to do.
Mm.
And I also needed a job to make money, right? To be able to pay
Right,
my
to pay off
rent,
those
to
darn
be able to pay
loans.
student loans, to be able to eat food. And
Yes.
so I already knew that I was probably going to start my own practice. And
Mm.
my mother's credit, she was an entrepreneur. She had her own dental practice for many years. So I had seen it done. I knew that I could do it. So I worked what's called locum tenens locum tenens, which is basically contract work. I did
Mm.
that for many years. I started my career as a locum.
Okay.
Never took a regular job. But I also,
Mm.
at the same time, I started an independent practice, growing this
Yeah.
holistic, this alternative medicine thing. And I rented a place from a chiropractor and such and such.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
first practice didn't do so well because I had no business knowledge.
This is I'm thinking of a lot of parallels in my own history there because one, it wasn't that big of a, oh my gosh, you're starting a practice. That was
Mhm.
20 years ago. That wasn't such a out there thing
Right,
because
right.
most doctors were in private
Mhm,
practices at that point.
mhm.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, even back then, and I think it's even worse now, business knowledge is not something that anybody told us that we were going to need.
That's right.
Nobody told us we were going to need that
No,
when we went in.
no.
But anyway, okay, so you started your first practice
Right? That didn't go
and
so well, and then I said, "Okay, back to the drawing board," right? Back to the
mhm,
drawing board because I knew that my destiny was to create this wellness center.
okay.
And during that time, I did do some traditional practice, during contract work. I did have an opportunity to go to New Zealand for 6 months and work, and so that was really great because I saw a whole different system of practice. I got to
Yes.
experience a whole different system
I
and
did not know
learn.
that about you. That's so cool.
Yes, thank you, thank you. But what was really cool about it is that in other countries, what I was learning was that integrative medicine was already being done. So
Mhm.
we in the West were like way behind, unless you lived in California or Arizona even,
Or even
They-
Arizona, right?
or even
Yeah.
Arizona, right? Like in the West. But generally speaking, this was a very new thing. So I came back from New Zealand with a whole new different context for how I would start my practice. I wanted it to be that intimate feel where the patient, like old school. I say old school, man. Some people will think old school is in the 90s, but old school is like, for me, is like in the 70s and 80s
Mhm.
where
Mhm.
doctors carried their bags and they knew their patients and they grew up with their patients' families. Like that was the way it was practiced in New Zealand. You saw whole people's families. You
Right.
were very close. You had long appointments with your patients, and I
Mhm.
wanted that. And so that's how I started my practice in 2007 is when I
Okay.
started my second practice
Mhm.
and continued to work traditional family medicine as I grew my integrative medicine practice. And it was a cash-based practice, which was also very uncommon
Very
because
uncommon.
right
Yeah.
at the time, and this again, integrative medicine wasn't a thing, so it wasn't often covered by insurance
Correct. Yes.
you know? So I trained in acupuncture during that time, trained as an acupuncturist. This was the first place where I began my coaching training in 2008. And this is before I started training in neurolinguistic programming, but I knew at the kind of doctor I wanted to be was the kind of doctor who could coach their patients through to empower them in their health and well-being. Like that's who I knew I was and who I knew I wanted to be around stress management, about time, around time management, around how to change one's diet, how to shop, how to prepare foods differently. All of these things these were the types of conversations I was having with patients, but I wanted to have them in a way where patients felt like they could own their healthcare, own
Sure.
their well-being.
Yeah.
And
No.
so
Absolutely.
that has always been my path, like being a healer in the sense of an empowerer of
Mhm.
the person who I'm working with, whether it be the patient or whether it be when I transitioned out, it was other physicians and healthcare workers.
Yeah. You know, that's very interesting because did you call it coaching when you first started? Because I don't remember even hearing the term life coach until maybe 10 years after that.
I didn't. I just did well, I trained as a coach and I knew what life coaching was, but I knew that I wasn't that inside of the exam room. So
Mm.
I would have patients come in for acupuncture and I put their little needles in and it'd be for it's a lot of I did a lot of women's health. I did a lot of fibromyalgia because
Hmm.
those were the throwaways back in the day, right? Like we don't know
Aren't they
what you got.
still kind of, sort of?
Yeah. I would imagine I think
I
so.
mean,
It's
I treat a
sad.
lot of that now, and
Yeah.
it's like they come in and they've been to four, five, six other doctors, and everybody's like, nothing wrong
Right.
with you.
Right, and so I got a lot of what other doctors would sort of be like, "I don't know,"
Hmm.
and so I would do acupuncture, and I would put them on particular eating plans, and they would find their symptoms would, would abate and remiss, and then remit rather. And then I started noticing that a lot of patients, while they were on the acupuncture table, would talk to me about their stress,
Mm-hmm.
and I would coach them naturally. And then that's why I got certified, because I said, well, if I'm going to do it, I should know how to do it in a way, like in the way that's the trained way,
Sure. The most
right?
effective. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
but I never called it coaching. I just
Okay.
I just did the thing. I just
That's
did the
awesome.
thing until I decided to more formally train in neurolinguistic programming, and then I started packaging it a little bit differently.
Yeah. What got you first interested in neurolinguistic programming? Because that's a little bit different than everything else that you've described so far.
Yes, well, so I already was, grounded in this mind body realm, and
Sure.
I'm very into personal development. And so I started doing some personal development work with an organization called Landmark Worldwide. And I noticed that they would have these weekends, and inside of these weekends, people would transform their lives in a very short period of time. And I wondered, how did they do that? So I started to look into the organization and look at what are the methodologies, what is the history, what was the methodologies they were using. And NLP, or neuro linguistic programming, was one of the big things. And I remember meeting a colleague some time ago who practiced that. And we were doing this, back in the day when we used to grow our practices, it was pound the pavement. It was like straight networking person to person. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I would involve doing some barter services. So, like, the
Oh, okay.
practitioner would want to know, would be able to describe what you do to whoever they were referring. And so we would do exchange services. So
Nice.
I had this one doctor, not MD, but a PhD doctor, psychologist, who did neurolinguistic programming, and
Mm-hmm.
I experienced it. And at the time, I just thought, oh, this is really cool. I can refer to her. Had a
Mm-hmm.
friend who was also a PhD doctor who did hypnosis. We did some exchange work. Once again, I thought, this is cool. I can refer to him. Down the line, I'm doing this. Fast forward down the line, I'm doing this work with Landmark, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing the research, and NLP comes up again. And I think, I'm already coaching. I'm already getting good results with the coaching and the nutrition coaching and the lifestyle coaching and the acupuncture.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I could get much deeper and even faster mindset shifts if I did this NLP thing? That's what got me interested to train. And then once I did the training, neurolinguistic programming, hypnosis, and then a technique called timeline therapy, which is essentially an emotional release and a belief release process that
Mm-hmm.
kind of takes people back to the root of where they formed the belief and helps to release it from that root. Because if you think about a string of pearls that are connected, if you pull off the edge of the pearl necklace, all the pearls fall away. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I could get the source of the belief, then I could dismantle the whole chain of beliefs that got formed as evidence behind it. And that's what I
Okay.
started to do with patients, like turn their
So
whole
cool.
mindset about what healthy eating was, about their capacity to cook or prepare, about their capacity to lose weight or to exercise,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was fun, whether it was not fun, like change people's mindset about their health. And that was fulfilling.
Yeah, no, that's really amazing. So, does a person have to have a particular certification to do NLP? Is there more than one training institution? So, like, I mean, I guess the question people will come and now that we've done this, they're going to come and ask me, okay, I need to find somebody who does this in my area because it sounds amazing and I want it.
Mhm.
How do I know the person that I'm hiring is legit?
Yes. Well, so I'll start by saying, if you're looking for a trainer, I
Of
haven't got to that
course.
part of my story yet, right?
Of course.
So I want to answer the question of how you know someone is legit, especially so whether you're going to train or whether you're going to find a practitioner in your area. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just like kind of continue with the story and then backtrack. So I
Sure.
trained in 2013 in these three disciplines, neurolinguistic programming, hypnosis, timeline therapy, fell in love with it because I recognized how quickly you can get results. Coaching is amazing. NLP coaching is transformational, right? Just
Hmm.
completely. So I was like, you know what? There's no way I'm not going to go all the way, right? I want to teach this someday. And I knew
Yeah.
that from the first training. So then
Okay.
in 2014, I had my son. 2016, I did my master practitioner certification. So you're asking how many certifications, right? So there, the base certification is the practitioner certification. You can go on to do your master practitioner certification, which I did in 2016, and I also teach and train. And then I went on in 2017 to become a trainer, to get my trainer's training. So if you fall in love with it, you're like, oh, I want to be a trainer, then you need to do your practitioner training, your master practitioner training, and your trainer's training. I was already a coach when I did this training. So I train a lot of people who are already coach certified, but there is a coaching certification within it, NLP, accredited by the ABNLP, which is the American Board of NLP and NLP coaching. So for there are people who I you can train directly into this and become a coach because coaching is embedded in the training process, at least in the school that I came up in and the way I teach and the way I train. You get all the coaching, training, and certification together. And so coming back to how do you know that a person is legit? Well, first of all, let's distinguish. There is NLP. So there are some schools that will only certify you in neurolinguistic programming and NLP. And they're, practitioner, master practitioner trainer, and that's fine. And then there are schools that are only hypnosis, and then there are combined schools. There are
Okay.
schools that will train you in hypnosis, I mean, in NLP and timeline therapy, called by various names. The way I was trained by the person who created timeline therapy, Dr. Tad James, the late Tad James. I was
Hmm.
trained directly by him in the methodology.
Hmm.
And people over the years, they may evolve it and call it by different names, but it's similar. So you just have to
Hmm.
know, and if you go to my website, I do have primer videos on what's what. So you
Okay.
can go to what is NLP, what is hypnosis, what is timeline therapy. So you can have an idea of what you're getting into, right? Just ask a person where they were trained,
Okay. That's
right?
easy.
Are they certified by an accredited body? Are they certified by the ABNLP or the IANLP, which is the International Association of NLP? If they're accredited and or by one of these bodies, or if they're trained at a training that is accredited, then this is a person you can do work with, you know.
Okay. Okay.
I would
That's
also
that
ask how
sounds
long have they practiced. And I will say that you don't have to have practiced for many, many, many years, but it's useful to know that a person has trained and immediately began practice rather than someone who's trained 20 years ago and they're just now starting to practice. That person might need a refresher.
I see. Hmm.
Those are the big things. And then I think the biggest thing is to feel how you feel with them. Is there rapport? How do you feel comfortable? Do you feel safe with that person?
Right.
Because this work is unconscious mind work. And I want to backtrack because we didn't quite define it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's talk about the definition and then what kind of issues and problems people would want to come to you with.
Yeah.
Let's talk
Abs-
about
Absolutely.
what this helps because I'm very curious too.
Yes. So NLP or neuro linguistic programming is a discipline that is based in neuroscience and psychology and linguistics. All right. So if you think
Okay.
about the terminology, neuro is the brain, linguistics
Mm-hmm.
is language, and programming, it refers to the programs that we run in our mind. So we are always running programs, internal conversations, and we're always running information through filters. Like I said in my TEDx talk, we have 11 million bits of information coming into our body through our sight, our sound, our touch, what we taste, what we feel, you know, and the brain cannot manage all 11 million bits of information. It can only manage 134 bits of information per second. So it
Mm-hmm.
has to filter it down. And
Mm-hmm.
it filters it down through these various filters in our brain that run programs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the
Mm-hmm.
programs, they get made based on our past experiences, our upbringing, the values and beliefs that are instilled and installed in us by our parents, by our educators, by our peers,
Mm-hmm.
by our post-grad educational systems.
Sure. Yeah.
And so what neurolinguistic programming does is it allows for us to utilize our language, internal and external, verbal and nonverbal,
Mm-hmm.
to reprogram the directionality of our thoughts, the way we think. So in some ways we use words. Words are only, however, only 7% of communication. The
Mm-hmm.
rest is our body language, our facial expressions, our tone of voice, the
Yeah.
velocity with which we speak, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all of that directionalizes our thinking internally and helps for us to be able to communicate with others and directionalize their thinking, which is a lot of what happens in coaching, right? So that's like reframing, that's based in psychology, like reframing. Some of the work is done awake state, some of the work is done in a very light trance. And hypnosis, so NLP really derives out of hypnosis. And hypnosis is just the state of being in trance. And we have all been in trance before. So you think about driving down the street and you think you get so deep in thought that you miss your turn or you almost miss your turn,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or
Or
you're
you
driving
turn
down,
when you didn't want to.
right, 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 right. Or when you are like on a route that you know so well that you don't have to think about it. So sometimes you're driving and you're thinking, I know this has happened to me many times. And then I end up getting home and I'm like, I didn't
How
even
did I get
remember how
here?
I got here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Trance, right?
Interesting.
Dancing, and you get into dancing, or like there's the runners, trance. There's like all kinds of different trances. But in hypnosis, you can either facilitate it yourself or you have a professional who facilitates this trance as a means of communicating with the unconscious mind and putting in empowering suggestions.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, it's useful for people to understand that hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming, these methodologies are being used all the time by media,
By advertisers. Oh, yeah.
advertisers, absolutely, the
Mm-hmm.
way they put words together, politicians. I was at a rally and I was listening to the way the people were speaking and I was noticing all the language patterns and it was, I mean, I was just like fun for me because I was like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I recognize what they're
I know
doing.
what
Oh,
they're
I
doing. I
recognize
know what they're
what
doing.
they're doing." Right?
So cool.
You know? So
Yeah.
that's a lot of what this work is.
Okay. So I see a lot of people who are super tired. They have chronic fatigue. They have thyroid problems that have been ignored for years because they don't meet the mainstream definition of hypothyroid.
Yeah.
Um, and they have lots and lots of beliefs. You know, I'm never going to be able to get well. I can't use medicine because it doesn't work for me. You know, medicine doesn't work for me. That's another one.
Right.
I can't lose this weight. I
Mhm.
am not a good cook. I can't,
Mhm.
you know, there's just so many things that people come in with. And then they also come in with chronic pain and they come in with
Mhm.
fatigue. And some of them even get to the point where their whole identity is wrapped up in the I am not a well person.
That's right.
And so, is NLP appropriate to help those people
Yeah.
regain their focus, their motivation,
Mhm.
their vitality?
Yeah,
Let's talk
absolutely.
about that and other people that you see that you're like, oh, this is what's going to work for you.
Yeah. So it's so great because I love what you said. You pointed out that some people get wrapped up in the identity of I'm not well or the identity of their circumstance, the identity of their condition, and they can become comfortable with I am not well. And
Mm-hmm.
so, one of the things that I think is so key is that when our beliefs drive our behavior, and if
Yes.
if you hold a belief that you're never going to be well, then you act accordingly. We have a saying, perception is projection.
Okay.
And so, one of the first things that when I used to work with patients that I would ask them is, are they ready to shift that? Like, are you ready to be well?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes people are afraid to detach from that identity. And
Yes.
when and yes, and because they're afraid of what's on the other side or maybe what's not on the other side. Sometimes it's the fear of failure, sometimes it's a fear I won't be able to sustain it. Sometimes there's all kinds of fears associated with letting go of this old identity that you were so comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that with patients that I used to do is I would, give them their care plan. And then we go over all the things, all the objections, all the things that they didn't believe that they could do with their care plan.
Mm, okay.
And one of the things NLP allows us to do is to listen for the lies, plainly said. Listen for what we call distortions or generalizations. But I say listen for the lies, right? So if someone said, well, I'm not a good cook. And I would say, well, how do you know that specifically? Or how specifically are you not a good cook? Right. So there's some different questions and language patterns that you can use to dismantle the source of the limiting belief. There are lots of
Mm-hmm.
ways to do it, but this is just one way, right? To
Mm-hmm.
really question the reality strategy of the belief,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we break that down and I'd continue to dig until they could see that maybe they made a dish wrong one time or two times and then decided that they weren't a good cook and then
Mm-hmm.
they acted accordingly. And then they would joke about it and people would reinforce that, but they wouldn't take the actions to become a good cook, right?
Okay. So just to reiterate what you just said, kind of summarize it,
Mhm,
the belief that you're not a good cook
mhm.
actually prevents you from taking steps to become a better cook.
Correct. Correct. And
This
also,
is fascinating. I'm thinking of an example from my personal life, which is when I was younger, I tried to do gymnastics
mhm,
and I couldn't do a push-up. I couldn't do a handstand. And so I became this belief that I'm not a strong person.
mm,
And because of that, I never tried. I never went to the gym. I never tried, you know, doing presses overhead. I never tried doing bench press. I never tried, to do push-ups. I never worked at it.
yeah.
And it's just like and in the last several years I've started going to the gym, and I may not still be the strongest human being on the planet, but I'm a
Mhm,
lot stronger than I was.
mhm,
And I realized after the fact that this belief that I'm not strong in my upper body
mhm.
kept me from even trying.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I guess that's exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly, and it can work for over the long time, like beliefs we hold, but it can work moment to moment. So I'll give you an example from today. So I
Okay.
practice yoga and I've been practicing for a very long time. So I have a fairly advanced practice.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I've learned about yoga is your yoga practice is going to be different day to day. Some days you're going to have good days, some days you're going to have bad days. So I have been traveling and have been a little stiff. And so I walk into the shala today, the yoga studio today, and I'm like, I don't know, like I don't know how my practice is going to go, right? So I'm doing the practice and I get to this particular back bending posture which I have a very precarious relationship with.
That's a nice way of putting it.
And so I come to this position and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to go all the way down today. I think I might just, take it easy. So I do my setup for it. And then my yoga teacher is like, she gives me her verbal coaching, like stretch your upper body, stretch your upper body. So I'm stretching the upper body. And then I do the practice one and I don't go all the way down. And then I say, okay, well, I'm going to try one more time. We'll see what happens. Right? I'm going to try it one more time. I'm not going to, exit out yet. I'm not going to take it off as an option. I'm going to try again and see how I feel. And so I stretch the body, and I go all the way down, all the way back, further in than I even intended to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then I come up and I'm like, you really can't believe the first thing that comes to your mind.
That is so important. That is, what you just said, that is so important because and this is, I didn't know about coaching. You're way ahead of me on this. I didn't even know what coaching was until, I don't know, 2018, 2019,
Mhm.
and I thought it was a bunch of bogus whatever until I started into a coaching program in late 2020 just because I
Mhm.
was so, I don't even know what the word to use, just distraught over COVID and the
Mhm.
changes in my life and everything.
Mhm.
And, one of the first things they teach you is that the thoughts that go through your mind aren't all necessarily true. And I'm like, what? What the heck? How can that be? I've been telling myself I suck for years. How can that be true?
Yeah.
Don't I really suck? I mean, and this, yeah. So that's so, so important
Yeah. And so,
that your thoughts are not always true and that you should always test your own and question your own thoughts because
absolutely.
some of them are so deep that you don't even know it's a thought. You're just like,
Mhm.
oh, that's just the way it is.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And so, I would talk to patients, they'd be like, "Oh, I don't know how to cook healthy." And I'd say, "What if you did? What would it take?" And I would just we'd make a few little tweaks and I'd send them some websites. Okay, this is what you do. Search what you usually like, but put the word healthy version behind it and see what happens. And these same
Mm,
people would come back like no less than a month later and be like, "Oh my God, let me tell you what I made. And let me tell you this that I made." These are the same people who 30 days ago were like, "I can't cook healthy." It's
that's
just
so
like
cool.
directionalizing the thinking, and we
Mm-hmm.
can learn to do it ourselves, but Imma tell you, 11 years doing this work and 20 years of yoga, and I came up out of that posture and still was like, "Man, I gotta remember this." You can't always believe the first thought that comes to your mind. You can
Yeah.
honor your feelings, honor that the thought is there,
Yeah.
but, like, question your reality strategy, especially if it doesn't empower you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, can you talk to us a little bit? You said that NLP is basically just a super rapid, accelerated version of
Mhm.
the coaching that you just talked about.
Mhm.
So, is there a way that you can tell us how that works? I mean,
Yes, yes.
yeah,
So
let's talk about how that works because I'm super curious.
the best I can. So here's the thing. We walk around thinking like we are consciously making decisions every day. I'm deciding to do this. In reality, it's the unconscious mind that really is running the show. All of the things under the surface that we're not quite aware of, that we believe, our attitudes, they're the things that are actually making the decisions for us. But we're not
Okay.
always aware that that's happening. So, what NLP does, and because of the fact that we're taking in so much information and our mind is always filtering it, we're always taking these shortcuts to making assumptions, shortcuts to making decisions based on all of our past. So, if
Mm,
we're not aware of all of these subconscious thoughts and beliefs that are happening, we're just basing on our past experience that we think is the truth, right?
mm-hmm,
Not recognizing that maybe someone told you you didn't do this well, and so you decided you weren't good enough. Or, like you said, you couldn't do a push up, and so you decided that you weren't strong. And so you made all your decisions based on this belief that you weren't strong, but you weren't
mm-hmm,
aware that you were making that decision based on the belief you were strong. You just thought you weren't strong.
mm-hmm,
That's the way we go about life every day. So, what NLP does is it gives you access immediately to the lies you've been telling yourself. And it allows you to sort of release the chokehold that the emotion has on you about it.
mm-hmm,
When you recognize a lie, you can't unsee it. You just can't unsee, you just now you know forever that that's a lie. When you
mm.
really get, "Oh, I made that decision when I was 5 years old."
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Right. The context of I'm say 45 and then a 5-year-old made that decision, you can now see, "Oh, okay, my brain wasn't developed enough to really make a sound decision about myself."
Yeah.
Right? And then people let that kind of stuff go, and it really just shifts how they see their life, how they see, like, their past, like, "Oh, all this time, I have been operating this way. Now I can operate a new way."
Mm,
And sometimes we have to learn how to consistently operate in this new way, but what happens is you start to catch yourself in the old thinking so that you can then redirect your thinking and your actions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's such a rapid process, because you recognize, oh, that wasn't ever true.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, how much of this is related to childhood trauma? Because, okay, so I would say most of my patients, at least half of my patients,
Hmm.
probably more than half of my patients,
Hmm.
go back into their past, and there is, their parents were always fighting, or they got a
Hmm.
divorce, or
Hmm.
there was domestic violence, or there was illness, or somebody left, or somebody died,
Hmm.
or it's the classic, the aces,
Yes, the
the
ACEs. Hmm.
aces. And going back and reteaching yourself, because a lot of children internalize those aces, and they
Hmm.
have this idea somehow that they were responsible for
Right.
those things happening.
Right.
And it's a perfectly understandable response, because
Hmm.
to believe that your parents are just thoughtless and they don't love you because they don't care is overwhelming and just impossible for a child. They
Hmm.
think, "Oh, if I was just a better kid, my
Hmm.
parents would love me better." How does NLP work with those childhood traumas to help people release the now physical stress that they carry every single day of their lives
Yeah.
that keeps them ill? Because
Yeah.
physical stress, people are like, "Oh, it's just stress." And I'm like, "No. Stress causes hormone changes in your body that affect you every single day. And you can get past those, but there are physical changes that happen in your body
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you're
Yeah. Yeah.
stressed, and if you're not releasing stress from whenever it happened."
Right. Yeah. And so I'll say I'll distinguish, there's not all stress is bad. Like there's the positive stress that builds resilience, right? And then there's tolerable stress that is short term and that is followed by periods of respite, rest and recovery that has support and that also expands and builds resilience. But what
Mm-hmm.
you're referring to is that toxic stress that then like starts to permanently rise the cortisol levels
Mm-hmm.
and alter the hormones, alter the hypothalamic, the brain's activity, the
Mm-hmm.
neurotransmitters, our serotonin, our dopamine levels, our oxytocin, like all of those levels, it starts
Absolutely.
to alter those. And so when we have toxic stress over time, it gets embodied as trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just to distinguish, like there are these different types of stress. So, you know, when we're talking about releasing stress, it's really like releasing toxic stress,
Mm-hmm.
like really releasing or going back to if life is going to have stressors and if we're going to build resilience, we have to be able to manage those. We have to have the right conditions to manage them. But
Mm-hmm.
toxic stress turns into trauma.
Mm-hmm.
To answer your question, it's hard to sort of say how much of this is related to childhood trauma because trauma is so subjective. What one person experiences trauma may not land in another person's trauma, but what I
Mm-hmm.
can say is that we all have been we all have in some way, form, or fashion experienced some kind of trauma, wherever that lands in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
I would say a lot of the toxic stress that comes up does have to do with limiting beliefs that have most likely started in childhood
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they did not become toxic stressors until later, until they started piling on belief evidence for this to be true and it began
Mm-hmm.
limiting the way they interacted with people or the way they interacted with themselves. And so over time that made those repetitive, we call death by a thousand paper cuts,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
turns into trauma in the body, turns into hypervigilance, turns into this held negative emotion, held sadness or held anger or held guilt or
Mm-hmm.
held hurt or held
Mm-hmm.
fear,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah, I
so
see a
what
lot of fear. I see a lot of fear.
Yeah, yeah. I see a surprising amount of anger, but it's like
Mm.
repressed, and people will come to me and say, "Oh, I don't hold that much anger." And then we'll do our process, and they'll be like, "Wow, I didn't know I had that much anger."
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so what I do, but particularly the technique that I use to help people release on that level is timeline therapy.
Mhm.
And it just helps to it really takes people back to when was that first decision made?
Mhm.
And putting people in different perspectives to kind of see that that wasn't true about them.
Mhm.
And even if there were some elements of it, it's not that we erase the memory itself, but it's that even if there are some elements that may have been true, it's not their fault, or it's something that maybe is in the past, they overcame it, they've learned their lesson, like particularly with guilt. If there's something that they did, because it's not all big traumas. It's sometimes it is, they did something, they felt guilty about it, and then they decided.
Mm.
And
Okay.
then they held that decision for the rest of their lives because of a thing that maybe was quite harmless
Mhm.
that they did, that then or something that they did that was not wrong, but because of a belief system of a parent was made a big deal out of and was
Ah,
shamed,
okay. Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
So I've seen that kind of thing. So it's not all that, like, the trauma doesn't necessarily come from something that happened to them. It may be because of a response of a parent or
Mhm.
and a decision that was made,
Mhm.
right? Or like beliefs being imparted up on a child.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, yeah, we help to release that through this process of timeline therapy. And then there's still some requisites. Like, this is not magic. I always tell my clients, I'm not a magician. I have a lot.
Right. Of
I
course.
have a particular set of
I have
skills.
a lot of skills, but I'm not a I'm not a
Right.
magician.
I always say, I have a particular set of skills.
But it ain't no magic wand.
Right.
Exactly.
And so the patient or the client, whoever I'm working with, has to
Mhm.
be willing to do the work. I always tell them, you're going to do brain work, and it is
Mhm.
going to be tiring. And it may be a little scary for you because it's the
Mm.
unknown, but you have
Yeah.
to be willing to do the work. And when you're willing to do the work and know that I'm here for you and I'm guiding you and it's a safe space, and that's why I say when you're interfacing with the person, if it's not me, even if it is me, you want to get a sense like, does this feel safe for you? Do we
Mhm.
have a rapport? Do we have a connection? Because that's the only way you'll immerse yourself enough in the work for it to work.
Right. No, absolutely.
Mhm.
And give me two examples of some changes that your clients have gotten that kind of exemplify the whole process.
Yeah. Okay. So you want clinical or non-clinical, or either? It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Just, somebody came in, they had this problem, and this is what happened.
All right, I'll do one of each because I think it's useful to show
The breadth
the
that you can get.
breadth of
Yeah.
this work, right? I had a patient who experienced severe migraines
Okay.
and was on disability for the migraines. So I was in clinical
Mm-hmm.
practice. And so there was the acupuncture that we did, and then there was the belief change that we did.
Mm-hmm.
And so she had a lot of beliefs. There was a lot of stress that she had, a lot of beliefs that she carried about who she was and who she was not, and what she was able and what she was not able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I specifically we did our timeline therapy process. And within 3 months, she went from having daily migraine to having less than 1 or less than 1 a month,
Mm.
was able to come off disability and return to work. And she was ready. She was like, "I'm tired of this disability stuff." And, we completed our work together, and every now and then she'd check in. She said, "Yep, still good."
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's really
yeah.
good.
I've done work with people who were I had worked with a resident, an orthopedic resident who was very nervous about his in-service exam. I did a hypnosis 2 hypnosis sessions for him, and he scored one of the highest scores in his class for his in-service that year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have had clients who have believed that they could not transition their careers,
Mm-hmm.
and through the work of releasing negative emotions, beliefs through timeline therapy, have
Mm-hmm.
gone on to start their own practices, start their own consulting companies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And are these a lot of these physicians, I guess?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I actually had one physician who this was not so much of the belief release, but it was more strategy related.
Okay.
She was sent to me by her organization because of an altercation between her and another physician. And when she came to me, she said, I really do want to work on my ability to put a pause between my response and what I experience in my response when
Mm-hmm.
what I
Mm-hmm.
experience is unsavory.
Is triggering or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it turns out that her internal strategy or her internal mechanism was she would experience something and then immediately respond.
Mm-hmm.
And through a particular technique that we call redesigning of strategies, internal strategies, we put a step in there unconsciously, rehearse the step. And then I met with her for different reasons 6 months later. And she was like, "Oh, that technique we did worked. I have not blown up," is how she called it,
Mm-hmm.
since that time. I always put that pause in there. And I've been able to, I haven't had any problems since then.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's so valuable. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's so much this work can do.
Okay. How does the hypnosis fit into that? Are they combined and simultaneous, or is the hypnosis kind of separate?
The hypnosis, so there are options, right? You can
Okay.
do both or you can do one or the other. So I
Mm-hmm.
am when I see a client, I will determine whether they might need some hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they come to me wanting it. They're like, I
Mm-hmm.
want hypnosis for XYZ, cravings or smoking
Okay.
cessation or
Okay.
insomnia or anxiety or, test anxiety or whatever the case may be. They are aware that this is what they want. But I always do the evaluation like the good family doctor that I am. I do an evaluation and determine whether or not that's the most appropriate intervention, right? So the NLP I do maybe for some things like cravings, or maybe for something I could also do NLP for smoking cessation. It
Mm-hmm.
also depends on how much time they have
Mm-hmm.
because NLP tend to be quicker techniques. Hypnosis can be a little bit longer. Timeline therapy are there are multiple sessions. So it really just depends
Mm-hmm.
on what they're coming to me for.
Well, this has been fascinating. I am so happy to have learned more about all this, and I'm sure my clients are loving hearing about this as well. So, I'm going to put your website up again, and it is mindremappingacademy.com.
Yes.
And how else can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I am very much on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I am on Instagram and TikTok as well. So I do a lot
Oh
of
my gosh,
posting about
TikTok.
this work on TikTok. So that's all / Dr. Maiysha. And I'm also on Facebook as well. Not as frequently on Facebook. And then I have a podcast called Behind Beliefs and Behaviors. And if you want to learn a little bit more in depth about the impact of NLP and communication and how it impacts our behaviors and our connection, our relationships, this is a definitely a podcast to listen to. So go check that out.
That's so
It's
cool.
on all of your podcast platforms.
Okay. And do you work with one-on-one individuals, or
I
is
do.
yours more institutional at this point?
There are 3 ways people can work with me. The first is one-on-one coaching. So you can work one-on-one with me. The second is if you have a community or organization, you're like, this is some good stuff. I will work with organizations both from the coaching perspective and also I speak and I do trainings and things of that nature.
Okay.
And then the third way is if you are like, what is this NLP stuff? I got to learn it. I train. So I have an accredited school and I do train people to be NLP practitioners, master practitioners, and coaches.
Awesome. That's so cool. All right. Well, so do you have any final word of wisdom that you can give to the clients before we sign off for the day?
I think that probably what sums it up is, don't always believe the first thought that comes out of your head.
I love that. I so love that. Okay. All right. Well, Dr. Maiysha, thank you so much for coming. This has been amazing. And I know my clients are going to love it. So
Thank
that's
you.
all for this week. And I'll talk to you guys again soon on Beyond the Thyroid.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been great. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Thyroid. If you found this information valuable, it would mean so much to me if you'll take a few seconds and give the podcast a 5-star review. It helps other people who need this information find the show, and it's really easy. Just search and click on the name of the show, Beyond the Thyroid, and scroll to the bottom to ratings and reviews. I truly do read and appreciate every one. Remember, when it comes to hormones, there will always be more to discover. So follow the show so you get the next episode as soon as it's released. And if you or someone you care about needs a caring doctor to help figure out how to heal hormone problems that other doctors have dismissed, check out my website at www.danagibbsmd.com. And if you're not a physician, please keep in mind, while I'm a doctor, I'm not your doctor. The content of this podcast is my opinion, and it's for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is not meant to be individual medical advice, and you should consult your own physician for any medical issues or diagnoses that you may have. I look forward to continuing this journey with you beyond the thyroid.